appears to me that the seat of the governor of the central bank is far more hotter than these seats here on the show.
People don't realize how hot that seat is, because your decisions can be extremely important to the overall economy of a country.
And what would you have done if this happened in your term, and for some reason you forgot to communicate these instructions, the increased amount required by the Treasury? You forgot. You know, I don't know, you were playing with your dog or something, and you forgot, for whatever reason, you forgot. And the consequences are horrendous. Some experts work this out for us here. It's like 35 billion as of yesterday, the overall impact of this bond, the increase. What would you have done?
Are you expecting me to ask that? I thought you made a statement.
No, I really want to know, what would you have done?
You see, I think there's a responsibility on our part to ensure that these decisions are not taken in a way that you would make mistakes on those. Those are absolutely critical decisions. If you look at the way over the last several years as to how the interest rates in our country have behaved, you would see that there is a pattern. There has been a pattern in which the interest rates have been coming down gently. We never allowed it to come down too fast. We never allowed it to be a huge differential between the inflation and the other parts of the economy. It was a gentle, careful proposition that we have been following. You see, one of the key functions of the central bank is stability. Economic and price stability and financial system stability. So I would have given that my topmost priority to ensure that the financial stability is maintained, as well as the economic and price stability is maintained. Price stability also includes interest rates and the exchange rates. So you have to be conscious that all these fit in together, because if you disturb, it's like I wonder, you would have done chemistry. There is this Le Chatelier's principle, where if there is a particular system in equilibrium. If you disturb one item in the equilibrium, all the others will have to adjust.
Right.
So interest rates are a part of equilibrium of an economy, which you need to be conscious of. So that is not a decision that I would have taken when I was playing with the dog.
So let's move on a bit. We'll put the Treasury bond controversy aside just for a moment. Can you say what prompted Governor Cabral and his team at the central bank to move into stocks and shares in terms of investing funds?
Good question again for us. You see, before Governor Cabral, the central bank had moved into some stocks and shares in 2004 itself. And the first investments in the stock market were done in 2004. But we continued with that, and we believe that that was the right decision to take. You see, when you have a fund like the EPF to manage, you've got to be conscious that you can give a long-term return. It's not a hedge fund that is there looking for a 2-year profit. You're looking at savings of people which need to grow with the rest of the economy over a long period of time. It's very likely that you would be paying someone 30 years after he has started his investments in the EPF. So you got to manage it with that long-term perspective in mind. It's not a short-term perspective where you get some high rate of interest for a short period of time only. You got to ensure that the fund grows. And we are privy to information like everybody else about the interest rate structures, the growth structure of the country, the way the economy is moving, where the rest of the world is moving, what kind of instruments are in place in the world. All those are matters that long-term investors have to take note of. So if you look at the trends of the country, we did see a trend where the interest rates were going to come down because inflation was being held in check, which meant that all the treasury bills, treasury bond rates were going to come down, which meant that the returns that people would get from just investments in the government paper would be high enough for them to be satisfied. So some element of moving into other areas was also necessary. So it was a conscious decision taken by the top investment managers of the central bank that we would move into new areas as well.
Right.
And stocks and shares was a very useful diversification, and that gave a certain element of growth to the funds that was being invested over the long period of time. So we are not looking at taking the money and having breakfast tomorrow.
Right.
This is money that could be invested for a long period of time,
Okay.
which meant that there was sufficient space for it to grow with the economy and with the private sector that we have been talking of, saying has been the engine of growth of the country.
Yeah.
So you've got to put your money where your mouth is.
Right.
So that was done. And as a result, we have a very good portfolio today.
Yeah.
And when I left, I know it had a unrealized profit of that portfolio, nearly 10 billion rupees. I forget the exact figure.
This is, you're talking about the
EPF funds that were invested in the stock market of the country, and at the time the stock market was also moving up, and it was doing very well. There was unrealized profit of nearly 10 billion rupees, or maybe more than that even. I cannot remember.
On a particular day?
On the day that I finished my term.
Right. Which was probably the 8th or the 9th of January.
So that time the stock market was at a level of about 7,600 points. The EPF's entire portfolio had a value in excess of its cost, as in the range of about 10 to 14 billion. I'm not 100% sure of that number, but around that figure. So which meant that the decision to invest outside in the stocks and shares was the right one.
I'm a bit troubled, Mr. Cabral, because I'm troubled because we have the Prime Minister's deputy, Dr. Harsha De Silva, who says almost the opposite of what you say. He says that all these investments are absolute loss for the EPF. So he's picking a different date, perhaps, is he?
Investments could change.
Yeah.
And that's the nature of investments. The same way that investments in government securities also could change. The par value, the market value can change. So investments are essentially made to make a return as well as ensure that there is a growth. Now, I'm confident that the investment managers of the central bank during my tenure did it in a way that was professional, that was technically competent way. And the results are there to be seen. And that is why when I was leaving, I was confident that it is right, because it had the values which were definitely in the positive territory.
Talking of bonds, please tell us about the tragic Greek bonds. Why did you buy them?
Firstly, I must say, it's not, sometimes when you ask, why did you buy them?
Sometimes you
Central Bank has a very, as I mentioned, a very competent team of investment managers as well as investors who do that.
Right.
Now, in the case of the Greek bonds, it was a very small portion of the total investment portfolio.
How small?
About 0.6%.
Right.
0.6%, which was consciously used to buy these bonds because there was a very high premium that could have been got through that.
Right.
At that time, I remember there was also several safeguards that were in place which would have given some safety to that investment. But it was the Greece's rating at that time was similar to Sri Lanka's rating.
Right.
So technically it looked as if Greece could fail, Sri Lanka also could fail from the outside world. Leaving that aside, there was a very high premium which could have been earned, and it's a normal practice of large fund managers to have a certain portion of their portfolio to be in high risk areas as well.
Right.
Now that particular year for us, which was being used on several instances, and there was a case at the Supreme Court as well, the total profit that was made by the central bank that year was something like $430 million, if I recollect right.
Oh, okay.
And that was on an average, reserve of about $6.6 billion.
Right.
Working out to something like 6 or 6.5%
Yeah.
as the return, which is one of the highest in the world
Yeah.
that time. So it obviously shows that the investment managers who took that call, not only in the case of the tragic Greek
Yeah.
bonds that you mentioned,
Yeah.
but as a whole, because
Right.
you are not only doing Greek bonds,
Right.
you are doing a lot of other portfolios as well.
Right.
So there is some risk in every investment.
Right.
Take the investments that the Chinese have made in the port city in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Somebody there must be shouting at them saying, why did you make that investment? Similarly, there can be some investments that don't go exactly the way you think it will go.
Right.
So, but you got to be sure that when you're doing it as a portfolio,
Right.
that it's not going to drag you down, but you will have a overall reasonable level of return when you have the final result being assessed.
So-
now
so-
there I would, sorry
Yes.
to give you one more point on that, Faraz. On that, I'm confident that Sri Lanka did very well that year. It was one of the best returns that we had. Compared to the rest of the world also, we did very well. And in fact, when the Supreme Court was petitioned by a certain party, the judgment was in favor of the central bank, and they did mention in that judgment that they found no wrongdoing. But at the same time, very essentially, a very important factor was that when you invest, you got to invest in a portfolio.
Right.
So when you take a portfolio, there can be some losses that could arise, but if a conscious decision has been taken for a diversification which has yielded the returns that you were aspiring for, then you have done well. And I think on those lines, the central bank did extremely well that year. And I think it's not, although the Greek bonds part was tragic, the rest of it was certainly not tragic.
Right. Thank you. Can I ask you quickly, again, topically at the moment, there are accusations that this government is, they seem to like you because they seem to be following you, is what the accusation is. They're doing, according to some of the reports, they're doing a cabral. They're appointing government people onto the boards of banks, and they're trying to have their men as chairman. They're doing a cabral. What's this all about? What have you done?
Can you permit me to give a little bit of background to that Cabral part?
Yes.
Because the first bond then we were issuing
Yes.
in 2007,
Yes.
some members of the opposition who are today in government
Yes.
said they won't repay it.
Yeah.
And we had a tough time in selling that bond.
Right.
And that time they said, if we come into power, we won't pay back that bond.
This is that 1.5 billion.
It was 500 million. That was the first bond that
Right.
we issued during the time of the war. It was a tough call. We needed the money, and it didn't help at all that the opposition at that time was saying that they won't repay it.
They may have been described as traitors at the time then.
Well, I didn't use that word.
No.
But it did put an enormous amount of pressure on us to raise that bond. But we raised it, and by the time the new government came, we had already repaid it also. So that was done. But there are other bonds that were in place at the time that the new government came in. And I was a little apprehensive, I must say, whether they would take that same attitude and that whether they would say, we are not going to repay the bonds that, as you say, Cabral has taken.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I must say, I saw subsequently that the key persons in the government themselves have said that they would raise bonds themselves. And in fact, they have said that they would raise a bond of $1.5 billion. And I saw the paper cutting. And I was actually very, very happy that that was being done, because then I knew that the bonds that have been issued were safe and that the investors will get a right signal.
Yeah.
And they themselves now are conscious that it is the right decision to make, to go to the markets and borrow money, because investors also like Sri Lanka's credit, and
Yeah.
they would be happy to make investments in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Coming back to your second part of the Cabral,
Yes.
well, it was not a Cabral thing to do that.
Right.
We had certain governance structures that were put in place for the banks.
Right.
And what happened was, for us, there was a certain cap on the number of years that a director could serve. One was upon reaching 70 years. The other was upon the completion of 9 years of service. And those are the two instances where director was not able to go further. So as and when there were instances of chairman reaching either 70 years or completion of 9 years, there were changes being made.
Right.
But I can assure you that not one single letter was sent from the central bank to any bank asking to appoint a certain person. The banks had the leeway to do that. But of course, they would have cross-checked with the main shareholders also whether there was a...
in this case, the main shareholders, the Treasury, the government.
Not only the government, there were other main shareholders also.
Right.
And that's the way the private sector works. I was in the private sector for 32 years for us.
Right.
I was only 9 years in the government sector. So in the case of the private sector also, any institution, the main shareholders would have a say as to who the chairman would be, as to who the directors would be. And when the directors do a nomination, and they have what is known as nomination committees now, nomination committees have the freedom to nominate new directors. That is part of the corporate governance code. Then the nomination committees would say, okay, we have now selected X to be a director, and then they will invite him. You don't have a shareholder, however large the shareholder may be, saying, please appoint so-and-so and make him such and such. That, I would think, is contrary to the spirit and the tone of the corporate governance provisions that have been put in place, which are now mandatory. And I would think, I would like to tell you that the Cabral period that you are talking of did it not in a way that in any way flouted these regulations.
Keeping in line with that, what would you do to help this government who are telling us that they are on the hunt for $600 million, billion dollars money that has been spirited away outside? As a seasoned banker, as a former governor of the central bank, nearly 9 years, how can you help them?
If there is evidence that any money is ill-gotten, if there is any money that has been earned through means which are not legal, and you know where the funds are, certainly go behind it. I think it is essential that this country pursues a policy of that nature, but it should be done in a professional manner. And if you are actually pursuing somebody's ill-gotten gains, you wouldn't tell the media and the public and everybody about it, because it will give them the opportunity of hiding it. That's not the way you do it. So to my mind, sometimes it appears that is it more a media show than anything else? Because if you're actually going behind somebody's ill-gotten gains, you don't want him to, in this day of technology, to be doing something which will take it away faster than you could pursue it. You would intelligently and with a lot of due care and caution pursue it in a secretive manner so that you can take it. It's the last thing that you would do to put it in the media to say, I am pursuing so-and-so's funds. So to that, in that context, sometimes it brings up a certain suspicion whether it is more a pursuit of actual ill-gotten gains or whether it is a pursuit of some other political advantage. But leaving that aside, I would come back to the position that if there is any evidence of that nature, you must go behind that and take it and punish those wrongdoers, whoever who has done it, and that's something that I would, as a patriot, would also endorse.
Is it easy to hide $600 million to $1 billion outside?
I haven't done that, so I don't know how easy it is. But I would think with the current set of laws that are prevalent globally, you're absolutely right, that it's not going to be easy. because all the banks are today conscious of money laundering. They're conscious of the movement of large sums of money. Because you see, don't forget that many of them have got their fingers burnt with huge fines.
Yes.
If you take the top banks of the world, for us,
Yes.
they have been fined massive amounts of money for this kind of operation.
Yes.
Maybe this kind or others come, I don't know.
Yeah.
But they have been fined. And they are extremely wary about moving any money. Even smaller chunks of funds, take $2-3 million, they will ask you a lot of questions. So in that sense, moving large sums of money is not easy, but it perhaps with the right, I don't know, possibly could be done. But I would think that banks are extremely wary about it, and if you do find that there are funds of that nature, it will be not too difficult to trace them as well and bring them back.
At the risk of detaining you here for even longer this evening, this isn't complete without this question. How much of influence did you come under from President Rajapaksa?
You want a very frank answer to that?
Absolutely, as frank as you can.
Zero. He gave us the freedom to manage the economy, and I'm proud to say that we brought it up to a level that we can all be consciously proud of. Many people in the world, when they see the Sri Lankan economy, used to admire it. I would say that the large part of that credit should also go to Dr. P.B. Jayasundara, who managed the treasury in an excellent manner. And together we had a lot of freedom to take certain decisions. Of course, we did consult the President on many occasions as the Minister of Finance, and the broad vision and the broad outline was his, there's no doubt about it. But the nitty-gritties of working it out, ensuring that the overall concepts are put in place and brought forward to the level that we have been able to get it to, was ours, and I have to take some credit for it, but giving a large portion of the credit to Dr. Jayasundara as well. I would say that it was an excellent arrangement. In all fairness to President Rajapaksa, as far as the economy was concerned, he respected the individuals who worked at the top positions, not only at the Ministry of Finance but also at the Central Bank. There were many occasions where in the course of conversations he has personally told me that he is extremely happy with some of the work that had been done by some of the officers of the Central Bank. And I used to convey that regularly to my colleagues as well, because it energized them, knowing that the President himself, who is the Finance Minister, was conscious of that. We used to invite him every year to hand over the annual report, and he used to come, and at every one of those meetings he used to personally thank the Central Bank team, and I thought that was an excellent gesture as well. So all in all, the results that we have been able to deliver, all those points that I mentioned to you earlier, the main architect of that is President Rajapaksa. What he did was, I think, phenomenal in bringing the development as well as the whole country to this level. Of course, we had to admit there would have been certain mistakes for which he had to leave. The people didn't re-elect him.
The buck stops with him.
The buck stops with him. And maybe we also have to take some responsibility in the sense that maybe some parts of the economy we could have perhaps done better in ensuring that some of the benefits flow down even more. But I think in the overall context, it was a tough call. I hope that the successors to our team will do better. Because I personally am very, very keen that this country goes forward, and I would like to see it prosperous and attaining all those goals, and I wish everybody well.
And finally, I think I need to ask you, Mr. Cabral, did you have a good time? Was it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you enjoy?
Very much. I had a great time. It was wonderful to lead that wonderful institution, and I'm happy about that.
Thank you very much for being in the hot seat tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.